Important caveat that one of the problems in the past has been, there's been a lot of effort spent on, well, how do we make this general enough to work with cubes and 1D spectra and, like polarization, right? And the goal here is to try to, instead of start from the beginning and like build everything at once, to sort of build from the bottom up, right? So we want to build it with compatibility with WCS tools that would allow cubes to be added later, but not necessarily start with the tool that does all of the things.
Did you mention polarimetry?
So this has come up as being a, that makes them like hypercubes, not just cubes, right? Because there's like a fourth dimension.
I was going to say I'd like 5, please.
Time, yes.
Yeah.
5 dimensions, please. Thank you.
5 is the highest we've come up with that is sensible. So yeah, polarization, time, energy, and 2 spatial dimensions.
I don't know if you already have utility functions for polarization, but I had to write a Python function for spectral polarimetry because it just didn't seem to be on there.
So, do you mean things like just,
Yeah.
we've had to.
I didn't find anything. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. But I didn't.
You probably did. I mean, for some of the radio tools, we've had to implement just at least a way to read something that has the Stokes parameters stored in a file. But that's as far as I've gone, because I don't do it myself, and we haven't really had anyone in the team. I think there have been not so many polarimetrists working.
There are not many, I think.
Yes.
Polarized people.
Polarized people, right?
A large amount of the multi-dimension, like the spectral data that solar physicists generate, has a polarization component.
You have too many photons.
All the photons.
Yeah, the tricky thing with polarization is that it is not, in the other dimensions you usually can represent them as linear, and so we traditionally have, but polarization is just it's tabulated, so it's not, it hasn't been as, it doesn't fit in the same framework as the others. But yeah, it's something we also want to consider to the degree we can, but that's not that's not a top priority. Yeah.
I mean, to bring things back a little bit though, part of the point here is that, as I'm saying, almost none of this has actually been, I mean, some of the Spectrum 1D.
No synchronous chat platform is the best thing to have all of that stuff archived on.
It's
It
not
should end up on a mailing list. That kind of discussion, in general, I find is not good.
So this is a meeting for discussion, right? So this is actually one of the things we discovered at this meeting just a couple weeks ago, not to, lead down the rabbit hole of our later on conference, our great debate, but that Slack was a powerful tool for organizing a mix of remote and current people around that had various different things they cared about, right? So there's a spec reduced channel, which is distinct from the spec utils channel, which is even separate from the ape discussion channel, and people could split off into the area they were interested in rather than losing the whole thread of the discussion. So that's sort of the point of this whole Slack interface for this purpose.
So, I think there's probably going to be a lot of discussion around what could be semi-contentious issues, and resolution will come out of that. And being able to, when someone 2 years from now says, well, why aren't you doing it this way? Being able to point them to the mailing list thread that says, this was the whole discussion and how we arrived at this can be really valuable.
Yeah, we hope that this is more for the developing the discussion to the point that we can put forth a formal proposal. The formal proposal will be the APE, which is the other document that we were showing. That will become a pull request, which then should have a discussion on the formal proposal there. So I think that the type of discussion you're talking about will be archived in that sense. This is, I think, meant to be a little bit more on all levels. Some of it is low level, like how do we code this specific thing? Is it even possible to code this particular approach? A lot of that has been going on, and also figuring out exactly, one thing we discovered with this discussion is that we actually needed a second ape. Basically, we need to define an API for world coordinate systems that would link to the spectra, because that was most of our discussion. We were talking across each other because we had different ideas of what a world coordinate system was. So that sort of thing is getting hashed out here, and it's this is supposed to be this type of open discussion on a channel. And I do want to just point out, before I stop talking, this is the website, astrophispectroscopy.slack.something. If you want to sign up, just go there, send a request, we'll plug you in.
Can I raise an obnoxious point?
Is it directly related to this? I just want to say one more thing.
Not the Slack channel.
Okay, then I just want to say one more thing about it, which is that it is important we be kept honest, right? That that might happen, right? I think it's a legit concern that if the discussion is happening on Slack and it doesn't get translated to some more public forum, that's an issue, and that needs to be fixed. The problem is, we tried to do this on the discussion list multiple times, and nobody was discussing it. And then when we started doing this, people started discussing it, right? So the proof is in the pudding that apparently people are willing to do this in a way they hadn't been willing to have this conversation before. But if we can move it to a more public forum,
You know, one with public history, like Matrix.
but that does not have custom emojis or multiple channels embedded in the same
Or-
team
Or mobile support.
Yes, it does.
it has
I
crappy
did,
mobile
my,
support.
All right,
my phone
Adrian.
wouldn't-
I was just
it
going to
wouldn't
object
display.
to the word
There's an
"use,"
iOS
which I
and
think
an
is
Android app.
overused in
Branded
our
right,
community
that
and
work really
adds
well.
no information to the name.
That's fine. The package name,
You
there,
can
okay,
get
there
much better
is a
experience
collection of
with native
utilities
code
related
than
to
you are
Spectrum
with
that
a
will
website.
probably go there,
You
but
can
I
get
think
much
we're gonna
better
end up with a
experience
Spectrum
with
1B
native code on mobile than
thing
you are
that
on a
eventually is
website.
supposed to go into AstroPi Core.
I mean,
Kelly suggested maybe analyze.
Spec
No.
analysis.
So that's-
spec utils
that's-
doesn't mean anything there.
so here's the problem, right, is that spec utils is two things rolled into one by design on some level. It's the underlying representation, right, the Spectrum 1B and maybe the spectral cube and, you know, all of that machinery, which will eventually get ported to AstroPi Core, hopefully, but right now, for the starting period at least, it's going to be in spec utils, but it's also spec analyze.
Mhm.
Right, spec analyze implies it doesn't have the underlying data objects, whereas, you know, spec data objects would imply it doesn't have the analysis tools, and it's good to start with those sort of together.
Maybe.
I mean, if you want to make, in
All I'm
practice,
saying is
the more we
word
separate these
utils
things,
does not convey the fact that those things are together any more than just calling it spec analyze and then later moving the
It's
class
shorter.
so I see your
I
point.
wouldn't abbreviate analyze because you're gonna take some situations.
Yeah. So I see your point, right? The problem is also every time you make a new package, there's a lot of administrative overhead. So if what you're doing is volunteering to be the maintainer and you promise you'll be able to keep up with it,
Well, at this
Then
point it's
I'm
just
more-
the edit button, but
No,
no, oh god, no.
no,
I mean,
it's a lot
there's
more.
so much more work to manage another package, trust me, I have too many already.
No, he's just
What?
talking about renaming
Yeah.
spec
No,
utils to
even that
spec
though,
analyze.
there's a lot that would have to be changed.
Yeah.
I mean, we could also vote. I mean, just like show of hands. Like, I like spec utils.
I guess I just wanted to voice my concern about future packages, like folk utils is another, so I don't want like
Oh,
average
that's also why
generic
that's
package.
also why it makes sense, is because we have folk utils.
No,
But
I
I
would
still
say
think
it's
that's-
misleading because
but I
it's
still
closer
think-
to spec, reduced is, I think, closer to foot util, or foot utils
Yeah.
holds
Really?
everything.
Utils
Yeah.
is just a vapid word that doesn't mean anything.
Didn't you
Foot
come up with
utils
that
does
thing?
all of the photometry.
I just thought-
Yeah, but so spec reduce is really talking about going from like a CCD to a spectrum, which is
And
more what like
Foot
CCD reduce
utils
is
goes
doing.
from like an image to photometry.
Yeah, to me that's the analysis step, not the reduction step.
So what
But
I'm
maybe
saying,
I'm thinking of
I
it
agree.
differently.
Yeah, CCD proc is the pre-folk util step.
So in the spectrum,
so would spec reduce get me a 1D spectrum?
yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
output would be a 1D spectrum.
The end.
Yes.
Okay.
And then spec utils is, once you've got your 1D spectrum, what do you do with it?
So
And
that
how do you represent it?
contains like the line fitting and.
Exactly. No, I agree, right? I see your point. I'm just saying, this goes back to Esley's very good earlier point that we should just do stuff, right? Like, the
I
more,
agree.
yeah.
But you also want to be consistent in some way, right?
Well,
That's why we call it.
like spec utils and folk utils. Seems consistent. Anyway, it's a good point that this should perhaps be discussed, but I'm not sure it's a good use of
All
everything's
I'm
time.
thinking is if we're overhauling, it's something to consider.
You're right, now is the time if it's gonna happen at all. But maybe that should be in the 8th
If
discussion.
he's willing to maintain that extra package, you can let him have his.
It's not an extra package. I didn't mean to.
Okay.
It's the
Yeah,
same
okay.
package.
Anyway.
I have another comment about something entirely different. I'm looking at your GitHub page for spec reduce, and I can't really find any documentation.
Yeah, again, the point here is,
I'm not it sounds like criticism, but I'm just saying,
no, again,
please.
basically
So there's also
none
a
of this
difference between
code
proper
exists.
spec reduce and AstroPi spec, yeah.
Well, so those are the same thing, but And so none of this, essentially none of this exists, right? The point is people have done a whole bunch of work that's sort of half bits and pieces of all of this stuff we're talking about. And what we're talking about right now is a document laying out how these pieces fit together. None of this, you should really think of it as none of this code has been written. Some of it has sort of been written and will be ported over if everyone's okay with this model. But it's basically you can find on any website anywhere anything about this other than that Slack channel and the ape. Sorry.
Well, I guess the way to think about it is that the code has been written by numerous people in a bunch of different places,
Yes.
but there hasn't been the agreed upon, we're all gonna contribute to this one package thing yet. So the idea is that once we get some of the base framework set up, that the people who've already written it and can essentially kind of copy and paste or slightly modify into the post framework, it can come together relatively quickly.
Okay, I see.
Should we talk a little bit now about the structure we have in place, or I mean, if there are any more questions, we can continue. But I think it might be good to show what we.
You mean about the Spectrum 1D?
Yeah, I mean, we got a little bit of we at least.
Or I think something more interesting, so is there an ape pull request? I couldn't find it.
No, the ape is still
A Google Doc?
this.
No.
No,
Nope.
there is a pull request.
It's on the,
Uh,
yeah, I did.
Oh yeah, sorry. But at the bottom of the pull request says, look at the doc. The last comment on it says, look at the Google Doc.
I just want so that people who are interested in this know what to subscribe to in order to keep up with
I
the
think there's-
conversation.
The
Might
Slack, if the
So,
Slack
I mean-
channel is discussing the ape, then and the ape hasn't been written, then
Well, so there is a complete draft, but there's been a lot of discussion about it, and it needs, right, the ape process, this is basically, it's all being drafted right now.
So yeah, this is the pull request
Here
here,
it is.
but if this last comment says go to the Slack channel or the Google Doc. So
What's the timeline for finishing the ape?
Good question.
it should have been
Maybe there's
End
some
of hack day.
a little sooner.
What, Tom?
It's an end of hack day.
Or before, I mean, because I think at Hack Day we wanted to actually code.
Yeah.
I mean, can we finish the ape before Hack Day? Like,
That's a great question. I might go
No.
over here to
Let's be
Slack.
totally honest. The realistic answer is no, because
Okay.
Nick and Steve are not here.
Yeah,
okay.
if we iterate quickly over Slack and they actually happen to be online and they say we're actually fine, then that's possible. We probably
Okay.
maybe we can have a telephone with them this evening or something.
But then you have to have,
Go over that.
There is work that could be done during the Hack Day, but if the question is, are we gonna finalize this before Hack Day, the answer is definitely no.
I guess my
Whether
question is,
someone is gonna spend all of Hack Day to finish this, maybe the answer is yes.
right. My question was more about when is the conversation gonna move out of the Google Doc and out of the Slack? When can we anticipate?
Eric, do you have any comment on starting here or we already kind of covered where the packages. We have the three packages kind of.
It might be worth talking a little bit more about that.
All right. So
I can give just a brief overview.
okay. Well, with SpecUtils, so SpecUtils is the package that's going to have, as we said, the Spectrum 1D object and some of the basic analysis routines. And we'll come back to that in more detail. SpecReduce, as we're saying, is the thing that gets you from, say, a 2D image of a dispersed spectrum, so your CCD, your grading reflects something onto a CCD, that gets recorded. You want to turn that into a 1D spectrum. That kind of stuff goes in SpecReduce, and the key here is probably this line, that SpecReduce is going to provide the tools that can get incorporated into instrument pipelines. So to some degree, for any instrument that gets built, somebody's already implementing something like SpecReduce, and the hope is that we can make a general enough set of tools that they don't have to rewrite them themselves every time. And then SpecViz is the more sophisticated, well, it's tools for visualizing spectra, and can involve some GUI related things, but we haven't really defined exactly what this is yet, except that we are, partly we haven't decided on this in any specific details yet because you have to have the basic objects before you can even consider talking about how, the details of how to visualize them. one thing that comes up though is like you actually do have to have a basic plotting thing, and so we do want to have some convenience functions for plotting a spectrum in Matplotlib. That's it. All you're doing is plotting a spectrum. So that will exist. Anything else to throw in there? Any questions about that breakdown? I think we were already talking about this quite a bit. But.
I heard specules is a bad name. I don't know why I heard it.
So, I have a question about specutils. Is that we're talking about it as like very basic functionality, but we're also talking about it being like the place for more advanced things like line fitting, but like analysis that you do post reduction. And so, I guess beyond line fitting, is there more vision, or is that just all?
I don't think we're not looking at any of that yet. Like so,
Well,
AstroPi but AstroPi model. I think we want to have an object in specutils that links to AstroPi well, but we're not necessarily providing the tool. We haven't considered yet whether we're providing a tool that says fit a line.
No,
Right?
that's definitely in there. Sorry.
Okay.
So the idea is supposed to be that what goes into specutils is sort of the equivalent of what would be an IRAP. That is to say, analysis tools that aren't very domain specific or aren't sort of cutting edge and not everyone has agreed they're useful, right? Like fitting void profiles to 1D spectra is something people have been doing for decades. So that should be in there in some manner. It might be as simple as the documentation has an example of how to use AstroPi modeling machinery, right? But that should be in there in some level. Measuring equivalent widths, that should be in there at some level. And then there's, I forget whether it's actually in the APE versus on one of the Slack channels or one of the other documents, the notes from the meeting, but there was an effort to brainstorm exactly what those sort of standard analysis tools are. So you get, when you ask different people, you get different answers as part of the problem, but we just have to settle on some super inclined towards getting involved in the Python ecosystem so much as people who run major spectrographs and have to use Python because someone told them they had to, or something like that, right? Which is a subtly but very importantly different group of people than who are in this room. So this is, I mean, that is overlapping feedback.
I'd also just say, it might be useful to be a little bit more verbose. Like, instead of just saying continuum subtraction or whatever, you could actually put down what your workflow would be.
Yeah, I also don't know what redshift spectrum means.
Right. So, and feel free to just make your own block, even if you're duplicating what someone else said. Just say exactly what your workflow would be. That would be
Yeah,
really
more
useful.
details better.
Yeah, think of it as brainstorming, right? There is no wrong answer. You say, this is what I would like, and that doesn't, just because you wrote it there doesn't guarantee it will be there, but it's useful information for people who later on might go and implement some of it.
Cool. Man cat.
Yeah, I'm
None of
jealous.
us can.
I saw that.
D redshift.
Do we want to keep going through the APE well? People, it's perfectly fine if you're ignoring us and instead typing. In fact,
Yeah,
that's good.
this is good. This is the kind of stuff we like to see. It is very helpful. Yeah. This is the next item. This is good to go on?
That's fine.
All right. So, one thing we think we've decided on, at least we've decided on now, is what the base spectrum class ought to look like. And it is an object that has a data array that contains flux or whatever the measurement of the light actually is. And that data array also has a spectroscopic axis associated with it. So an energy, wavelength, frequency, velocity axis. And this basic class will include the conversion between all those various units, so that you have easy access to wavelength, frequency, energy, or velocity, depending on whatever your use case is. So the basic class is just going to contain this spectroscopic axis, flux, errors will also be stored along with it, some sort of the units for both the flux and wavelength, of course, and the various metadata about the spectrum. So that's the basic unit object we're on.
I don't know if we want to discuss this here, right? But an area of discussion that came up a lot during the workshop was the question of how tightly we need or want to couple a more generalized approach to world coordinate systems to this idea of a spectrum 1D, right? So this is the way you might think of a one-dimensional spectrum as work. That, I mean, not at some level, just that does need to work. But the question is how much needs to be built in at the same time alongside.
Pixel and give out an energy or a frequency or wavelength, whatever that is. And as long as we have one of those, we can make a spectrum.
Can I take a couple minutes and elaborate on the basic issue there? For a lot of people, they think all I need is a wavelength table. And they sort of focus the object on that basis. And they said, there's no reason we can't support that, but it shouldn't be limited.
Or logarithmic or whatever spectroscopic axis. So we want to be able to handle those different types.
So, I mean, are you thinking about things like, I know a lot of times dispersion is like stored in the header with like a 0 point and like a linear, and would there be the flexibility to have like higher order terms?
Yes.
Yes.
So just,
He's blind.
yeah, the way it works right now is the FITS world coordinate system standard is the only thing that's implemented very well, or at least implemented and well understood by a large fraction of the community. That's linear only, but the GWCS, Generalized World Coordinate System, is the package that Harry's going to talk about a little bit at least. That implements some of these more difficult things. And so one thing that would be interesting to me is if you guys have spectra that have some sort of functional form for the x-axis that is different, that's not linear, or say you have a logarithmic one. I mean, Sloan spectra fit that, or I don't know, power laws, polynomials, whatever. It would be interesting to see some of those. And see what format you stored them in. So one of the biggest things we actually haven't talked about at all here, but is actually critical to development, is developing the I/O utility. So reading these files from disk and reading all the various formats that are out there. A lot of times you get sent your 2 columns of text. That's a very simple one. That's easy to deal with. There's also the FITS one, but there are a lot of other formats of spectra. And if you actually, can we add that as another? If you're editing the Google Doc, put in some links to spectrum, single 1D spectrum objects that you have had to deal with. If you have any that are public, it would be nice to know what file formats exist out there. That actually really helps concrete development because we know exactly what we have to implement readers for, and maybe theoretically
I think I'm
writers.
going to start a new part of the Google Doc.
Yes, that's what I was asking for. Thank you.
Links or descriptions, because you could just say like Sloan, like from,
Yeah, a link would be much more helpful in that case.
And I should add, this is something that actually is potential hacked material.
Yeah.
Right, so I said we have no code, and what I really mean is we have no code except for sort of most of the way code for the Spectrum 1D object, right? That's the one thing that actually does have a decent amount of code. So there is enough there that with some back and forth, you can probably write a reader for a random spectrum you have that isn't supported by any of the existing efforts. And that might be useful either for you or for us.
So, I mean, would it be possible to not define a dispersion and still get an extraction in pixel space, or would you need some kind of, because like I know sometimes I'm like, I don't care about the wavelength calibration right now, I just want to see what it looks like and I'll figure things out later.
Oh yeah, dispersion could be pixels, right? That's a valid unit.
Okay.
What just happened? I didn't do that.
Prepended.
That's weird. I don't think that is actually compatible with the objects we have defined so far.
Well then that should be added as a possibility, right? There's no reason the dispersion axis can't just be pixels. That's the simplest world coordinate system of just y equals x.
Well, okay, so you can do it. It's just going to break all of the dot wavelength, dot frequency, dot velocity. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean,
That's fine.
it's a
Yeah,
good
that
point,
should be
but
fine.
sometimes you just want the 1D spectrum and you don't have the wavelength calibration, right? That's a really good point.
Or you don't want to have to deal with trying to, like, especially quick looking,
Yeah,
well
that's a really good
observing and
point.
stuff.
Yeah, that should be fine actually.
But I just emphasize that the nice thing about defining this data model means that everybody can start writing routines and read their own specific data. Doesn't have to be done by the core team, just means I could be somebody with a unique instrument, now I know what I have to write to make this, all the rest of this code usable to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the machinery that already exists for what's already in that repository lets you do that. You know, if you want to do a Hackday project, it does not require any merging into any repository. You can just write your own little reader that is supplied as part of your code, and it sort of plugs into the I/O that's already there. And that's sort of the point of the whole goal of this being an interface object that people can use to connect various strings of effort together, rather than having us all have to work in one giant monolithic thing that nobody knows how to handle. Sometimes that's good too.
Google Docs being actively edited.
Excellent.
Should I pull that?
Best form of
Up again?
science. Is there any more on this eighth thing we want to talk about as overview material?
I just highlighted this line because we were just talking about. This is, I guess, sort of the wish list that you guys are building upon right now, and I think we've covered some of the things.
Yeah, so like this is where we're sort of talking about what might be in specules, right? And then, you know, this is more like in more general senses, generally what belongs in specules.
I also just, for those of you that are editing Google Doc, notice that most of the things which we brainstormed are already on this list, just to kind of like reassure you.
How do we get to this document?
It's in the
Yeah, I
Google
didn't post a
Drive
link to
folder,
it.
and
Should
it's
I?
on the chat, and it's on the Monday Google Doc.
Is it? Wait, this is?
Also, this one? I'm
This
sorry.
one.
No,
Yeah.
this
Should I-
is
I
the
think
one.
they keep this one. Because you can condense what's in the one that we're actively going crazy and then put it there, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
people want to read
You
this.
can look at this if you want.
I-
I think there's a link to it from the pull request, right?
That's a good question.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's at the end of the pull request.
I didn't
No,
see the
that's
link.
just-
There's a
that's
reference
just
to.
a note.
Oops, that's
No.
wrong. That's wrong.
That
You know what?
need to look at
Add
it.
a view only link at the bottom.
Yeah, I'll do that. Let's see. Is it share? Oh, oh.
Yeah,
Share.
there. What's the error situation? Can you use inverse variances?
Oh, I
God.
see, it just says added to the Google Doc.
Oh, there, you don't want anyone can edit, do you?
No, not that. Go up, anywhere with the link.
No, I tried turning it off and it said I couldn't edit it anymore.
No, but you should add yourself first and then do that. You should add yourself to the edit and then.
How do I do? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you've
share.
given
Can I
an
do that?
edit link to lots of people, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
You can remove permissions to other people.
What?
I mean, you can remove permissions to other people that have already edited permissions to there.
Here, hold
So
on.
unless you add everyone else that you know in there.
I'm gonna add myself.
No, but you have to add also everyone that is already editing the file.
Click advanced.
That's okay. I'm gonna.
Oh, yeah. Advanced
Yeah,
was a
sure,
good
that's-
idea.
If you click advanced, you'll be able to see who already.
Okay, I'm gonna take away my own permission now.
Just copy that file and leave it in
Wait.
place and share with us.
Go to advanced. I think Kelly has a really good point.
Wait,
That
did
we
you
want
just-
to do advanced things.
Yeah, you just change it so nobody can do anything other than do it, right?
Yeah, but
Other
so,
than me and
but then
Steve.
he'll need to add
I'll,
Steve.
I can
and
add
Eric
people back now.
as-
I think
as
unless,
editors.
I may have made this permanently uneditable, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
No, you didn't. You'll be able to add people
You change it to
to
Ken
be able to
comment.
edit. It's fine.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. I'm gonna make it commentable.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
Copy link.
Yay. How many astronomers does it
you need to
take?
hit done for it to apply.
And it's 4:30, which means.
Is this the right Pi Astro? Yeah, this looks like the right place.
It would,
Yeah.
could someone also
Yes,
put that
I
in the Google Doc for
Yes.
this, the
Yes.
specules thing?
Where?
I got it.
Okay.
By the way, I added, the arrows with that was me asking questions. So if you put something on, double check the list, because I ask clarifying questions or prompting questions to try to get you to write more.
I think maybe, I'll check with Stuart, this is a question for you, but perhaps we should have our great debate on Slack versus Matrix on Wednesday and use the results of that to determine what we tell people to do about joining this group.
Can't we just make a matrix and then bridge the two together?
Maybe
See,
one of the
that's
hacks.
the whole problem.
Maybe one of the hacks should be an interface.
Are we gonna, let's see, it's 4:30, let's let them in, close this off.
I know this like the owner of
Oh, we need a reporter from the session.
bridge and then push into the matrix.
I think we're going to come in with some
No, the point is that that's the reason why the bridge actually has because people don't use it, don't necessarily use Slack effectively during the bridge structure, but
Adrian, who do you think should be the reporter for the session? I think it should be either Eric nor Adam. The reporter of the spectacle session.
Oh, yeah.
maybe
Meredith is already doing
I've heard Adrian.
Maybe Ashley, do you have any interest in being the reporter from that session?
The reporter.
Like to report back to the group about spectacle session? No, I don't want to do that.
I do not feel like I can accurately reflect. What does APE stand for?
AstroPi proposal form. It is, it's Python enhancement proposal.
laptop?
And,
And AEP didn't spell his name.
that, I think, is the correct conclusion, but look up,
Very powerful.
there's
and
eighth
very
thing on
important.
AstroPi, and actually the first one
It's a
says.
desktop that you can carry around with you.
Okay, that's actually, yes. Are we still live streaming? Shall we, maybe I'll take it on the mic?
Maybe not. You can take the mic. I clicked it on here so that it was basically blocked.
So I guess.
I say we are. It appears that it's died on.
Is everybody back in? Have the people joined us from simulation? Yes? And from Flex Chat?
Flex chat is here.
Excellent. Cool, so can we start with the reporter from GUI Dataviz? And I think since we're still live streaming, I'll hand you the mic. All right, do you want to?
Oh no, come on. Let's go, please. At the center. All right.
Yeah, just hold it.
Okay, so there was some fairly extensive note-taking on our session, which you can all find in the Google Docs, unconference GUI/dataviz. And so, coming from a new perspective, for me, I'd never developed GUI, so it was interesting to hear what people have been working on and what they recommended. So generally, there were 3 tools which were mentioned, or actually 4, for making GUIs. You had Qt, GTK, WX, and web-based HTML plus JavaScript. Generally, Qt seemed to be the most used interface, and there was also a discussion on how you actually program with the GUI, because it's not a sequential sort of programming, but you've got all of these actions, so it's a different style of programming. And then I gave a short demonstration of Vogue, but hopefully I'll be giving a lightning talk on that, on how to create interactive plots. And then there was something about 2 styles or 2 different sides of creating a GUI. You got your model, which is interacting with all of your data basically, and then you got your view, which is how to interact, which is where your user interacts with all of those functions. There are a lot of links in the Google Docs, which is great. Some good tutorials there, and that was sort of it, I think.
Good.
Any questions?
Yeah, we probably do have time for questions.
It might be worth asking again, since it's the full group, if anyone wants a tutorial on.
Oh yes, so one of the questions we had was whether anyone wanted a tutorial on Qt, or how to create your first GUI. And so got a couple of people. We'll probably then organise a session, or we'll put it up on the whiteboard and we'll see what happens.
So like, is glue made in,
Glue is in Qt.
okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, then shall I pass the microphone on?
To Meredith.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Did you just tweet it, Adrian?
No, it was when the session started.
Oh. Spec your tools?
I say the word documentation, I think like somebody tells me how to use the software that's here. And while that's generally true, that gets broken down into like 4 different main
I
components.
put the image up.
You put the image up. And Kelly made a wonderful graphic on the whiteboard, which summarizes this well. So the subsets of documentation, one of them is called documentation, because that's not confusing. But that is kind of the traditional, like when you go to AstroPi's website and you're like, oh my gosh, there's this funny function, what does it even do? You click that and there's like a bunch of words. Like that is a restructured text document. It's similar to Markdown, but it's like different and weird. And it also includes the doc strings when you're actually writing the Python code. You like explain what you're doing in the code, and that also gets put on those web pages. So those exist and are pretty much thoroughly there, which is great, but it was pointed out that they're not the most friendly intro. If you're like, I don't even know what this object is and I would like to do something in AstroPi, it's not like a friendly starting point. So to kind of flesh that out, the AstroPi also has this examples gallery, which is somewhat similar to what Matplotlib has. If you've ever tried to like make a plot with Matplotlib, you've probably found yourself with the examples gallery being like, how the heck did they make a circle with a bunch of dots on it, or whatever the case may be. And so I didn't even know this existed until today, but there is one now for AstroPi. It's not all plots, but it's like end results that you also might desire. And they have little snippets on this site that you can like use these little Python snippets to use like a small chunk of one functionality of AstroPi to like do a thing. And they're very confined, and they're right here because Kelly's amazing. And so do you want to click on one to show, like, yeah, sure. So maybe you have a FIS file and you want to make an image, right? I feel like most people have probably been at that point in their lives. And so this kind of shows you how to do that. And you have an image that plots, if you're lucky. But it gives you like all the steps with the AstroPi tools. And it also includes like Matplotlib, so it's not just AstroPi, it incorporates other things as well. One step further than that is tutorials, which is a little bit more intense than examples, and it intentionally incorporates lots of different elements from different AstroPi packages, Matplotlib, and just like general intro Python best practices, like, hey, maybe we should write a function now that life's getting complicated, and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like it's a good teaching tool. We had several people in the session who use these like for their students and point them, say, hey, I want you to learn how to do a thing. Please work through this as like your homework, basically, for research, which is super great. They are all Jupyter notebooks, and they're also up here because Kelly is the best website clicker. And this is a growing thing. If you want to write one, AstroPi would love you to write one. And they are not intended to be for specific instruments per se, but they're rather for like the kind of tasks that astronomers would do that AstroPi would let you do. But it's like a bigger scope than the previous thing, the example gallery. The last thing that we talked about does not exist yet, which has made it super fun to talk about. And we're either calling these cookbooks or guides. We kind of changed to calling them guides near the end of the session, because nomenclature is fun. But the idea is that some of you may remember, and I had to like have a memory refreshed, that in like the 90s, I guess, Phil Massey wrote a whole bunch of like IRAF 101 like epic PDF documents that you may have once sat down and beat your head against a wall with to like try to do anything with IRAF, if you've ever done that. And they like bullet points. It's like it explains what a CCD is. Like it goes into great detail both in terms of the instrumentation and astrophysics, and like, by the way, type these things, and then you can do, you know, the end result. But it's like almost like a textbook in that it's like there's chapters, and you know it goes you through the whole thing. So these don't exist yet for AstroPi, and we brainstormed a lot about what that should look like. who should write them? Do we want them to be exactly like that? What role do they play in this architecture? Not all these questions were answered, but it was a useful starting point. Let's see. That was the gist of what we talked about. We got into some nitty-gritty details about how it's difficult to get, so if we want these tutorial notebooks to actually not break when AstroPy gets updated, that's a non-trivial problem. So that's something we need to figure out.
Also, there's funding for support.
Right, yeah. And so there actually is some funding that exists to work on these problems, and I think Eric is the expert on that if you want to know what that means. He's like, sure, whatever. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So those things exist, and or will exist, and or might exist.
So we did decide that we needed some new leads for some things. So we decided that we needed an AstroPy documentation lead. And so that would cover the stuff that's generated with Sphinx. So the documentation and the examples gallery, and so that's like a non-trivial role within the AstroPy project. And then Leah and I are also volunteered to be the tutorial guide lead. And so we developed 2 new roles in the AstroPy project, one of which is filled and another one which is looking for a person.
You care a lot about these things.
You can also be deputy.
Right, and you could be deputy,
Which is
not
like
the lead.
backup lead, right?
Or lead in training.
Yeah.
Sure. Nomenclature.
What is
Your
next?
input gets a lot of weight, but you don't actually have to feel the pressure of clicking merge necessarily.
I lost that other image of the,
What was the third group?
Simulation?
already went?
Observatory control.
Observatory controls. Some people combine their chair and reporter roles.
Okay, so that was a pretty small group, just 3 of us, and we discussed, you can see it, Google Docs. You can see that on Google Docs. I was thinking about creating a kind of associated package which will use astropi.ic for the instrument control, and use the variable command state running to control the devices in the observatory and provide the artist the backend with the example they have available. So that's a small group results.
Is someone double checking that all the docs from the unconference sessions are linked on Monday?
I have.
Are they there? Okay. And then this room, I think Specutals is next. You can stay there if you want. Okay. And I'll open the doc.
Okay, so specutils is something that a lot of us care about in terms of actually reducing our spectroscopic data in a uniform way. A lot of people are still using IRAF, and so we've been talking about this for a long time, but it's a tricky project and resources have gone elsewhere. And so finally there was a meeting about 2 weeks ago that got specutils and associated packages up and running. So we're now looking at 3 different packages: specutils, which has the basic underlying spectrum class, and then some kind of post-analysis things you might want to do. Spec-reduced, which is about how do you get from a 2D image to a 1D spectrum, and then spec-viz, which talks about how do you actually visualize your data, and that has been started to be developed already in terms of being able to, plot something. So the IRAF equivalents are also in here, or at least some analogies. And now, in addition to Eric and Adam working on this, Steve Crawford, who I don't know who that is, but that seems like a name people knew, and Nick Earl, who is an RIA at Space Telescope, are all coordinating this, and Nick actually has funding from Space Telescope to get this up and running. So he has a GitHub branch on his own personal GitHub that some of this development is happening on, and we're working on merging that back to the main specutils so that it's more visible that this development is going on. And if you have any functionality that you care about, there is a place to brainstorm that. And then also any kind of 1D spectra that you might want to care about. Eventually, I guess during the lightning talks, Perry's going to talk about a generalized WCS, but one of the things is what type of dispersion, how do you express your dispersions to give us the most flexibility? Right now, there's a very well-defined linear dispersion solution, but what else would you like? Something else I wanted to say.
The 8?
Yes, that one. Okay, so out of this coordination, there is a Slack channel, which is also linked to here. And this is where discussion is happening that will go into an APE, which is AstroPy proposal enhancement.
Yeah, for enhancement.
For enhancement. And so that's going to be the proposal and big picture for this package. So if you want to contribute to building the initial proposal, you can join the Slack channel now. If you want to just comment once the APE is there, there's also a GitHub issue for the APE where you can comment, and there's also a link to a Google Doc where the APE is described in detail and kind of its current form.
Questions?
And I think this may continue as a hack or...
If not more than one hack.
Yeah.
Who was in 301 at 3:30? Who's next?
Simulations? I'm not doing that. Who was
Who did you
doing
nominate?
Simulations?
Who was actually reading
You. I keep some notes, but get some notes. Maybe your best, or maybe you can do that for someone else who's there.
Yeah.
The reporter is an important role.
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this, so sorry.
Do you want to? He said he doesn't think he can. I'm not sure. I don't want to get him to the mic.
No, then don't.
Okay.
Maybe Dave? Maybe you can say something?
No, yeah, I've already done one.
You're
You can do this.
I'll try.
It can be very short. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, so in the simulations we talked about simulations, how to do that, and what you can do with Python for simulations. So one of the things we started off with, what was my idea, is to talk about Amuse. So Amuse is an interface written in Python for code, so you don't need to write your own thing in Python. If NumPy already has it, NumPy has already optimized a lot of things, a lot of calculations. So no need to go into details with that, with your own optimizations. So just go back to this thing here, the Twitter. What else did we talk about? Those are the most important things. We were talking a bit about the foxes and bunnies problem. You know, that foxes eat bunnies, and if they will eat all the bunnies, but if the foxes are too efficient in eating the bunnies, that's a problem. You don't want that. So this is kind of an optimization problem that you need to worry about. And I would personally not recommend that foxes eat all the bunnies because they're way too cute. Yeah, we were talking about things, how to do that in Python, and yeah, NumPy is apparently quite efficient with that as well, and Numba. That's what I can think of at this moment. I don't know if anyone else in the session has anything to add.
Questions about simulations? About YT?
YT visualization we talked about for a very short time. Documentation, yeah, documentation. Documentation is extremely important. Do it. Yeah, documentation. Yes, Sphinx. We talked about Sphinx, which is apparently very useful in auto-documenting your code. If you write the correct doc strings in your code, which is more or less the same as writing a comment. Or at least it is very similar and as easy. It takes about as little time. So do it. Write doc strings in your code.
I wonder if we want to have a tutorial proposal for documentation. I could see that being sort of a companion tutorial to testing. Maybe.
Using Sphinx and stuff like that.
Well, even writing docs learns how to write well, I mean, basically intro to documentation. Like if I say document my code, what do I mean?
Doesn't it already exist? I mean, if you just browse through the NumPy, how to document your code, kind of NumPy doc,
So
it does that.
I actually just did this like a week and a half ago for the Data Science Fellowship program.
A
So I would-
documentation tutorial?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was exactly what it was, so
Okay.
we could just use that. If
Yeah.
people are
I mean, we could
interested.
put it on the board and see how,
Yeah,
see if it finds traction.
yeah. But it's, very low level, the level you're talking about,
It's,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
like-
it's an introductory,
Is
it
there
would be an
only one?
introductory level tutorial.
Is there only one tutorial session?
There are 3 slots for tutorial sessions, and then we're also thinking of having concurrent tutorial sessions, so there's room for as
But I
many as
can't.
6 tutorials.
But I can't go to concurrent sessions.
Right, no, so we would try to have, because like not everybody's ready for a packaging tutorial, for example. So we're trying to think of sort of the different tutorials which match different people's development interests and levels. Yeah.
I misunderstood you, so I'm apologizing.
Okay.
I meant, you put a tutorial, it does write tutorials about documentation.
Oh, right, right.
That's-
Yes, no, I was just talking about a
Yeah,
tutorial
no, that's,
for
yeah,
tomorrow.
totally agree, yeah.
Anybody else, questions, discussions about unconference? We have about 6 more minutes before I think the wine and cheese are served. Is it wine and cheese, beer and cheese?
Wine and cheese and beer and cola and nuts and paprika.
Excellent.
Whatever.
Everything and everything.
The name of it looked like beer to me. That's why I think it
The
starts.
name wine and cheese?
No, it's called
Boreal.
like
Boreal.
Boreal?
B-O-R-R-E-L.
What does that mean?
Very important Dutch word.
It means, the party at 5 p.m. where you have beer and cheese, like that's the name of the
Wow,
Like that's what it is.
That's what he just said.
There is a unique word
Yeah.
for it.
And so I think for this evening, we're essentially like on our own for dinner after Boreal. And, but I'm sure that there will be different groups, so.
Is the word for it? The
And,
dinner, yeah.
On the Lorette Center workshop, they, as she said this morning, they have links to some various restaurants in the area. There's TripAdvisor, and then on Twitter, on the main Piastro account, people tweeted at us and we made a thread of like interesting places in the area for nice beers or for this kind of food or whatnot. So have a look there.
Could you retweet that? Where is it?
Can.
Yeah, so that it's higher in the thread.
I will retweet that.
Does anyone else want to have any closing remarks today? We're starting tomorrow. Does anyone have this program up? What time do we start tomorrow?
9:15.
Okay,
Coffee
yeah.
at 9:15, start 9:30.
Okay, coffee at 9:15. We're going to start at 9:30. Any other questions logistically? So tomorrow we do have talks in the morning, I think, and then we'll figure out what the tutorials will be later.
Yep.
Oh, do
Alright.
you want to just mention sprints? Or we're gonna talk about that?
Oh, we're gonna do that in the morning,
Also
won't we?
tomorrow morning, we're going to have one slide on the difference between sprints and hacks.
Probably 3 slides.
3 slides, okay,
But
3
big,
slides.
big words, like,
Okay, 3 readable slides.
yes.
Yes, 3 well-designed readable slides.
I guess the relevant bit is that the afternoon is a mix, depending on what you want to do and what you're interested in, of tutorials, and you might have your own sprinting time, right? To just sort of like work on something
Yeah.
related to this.
And you may also end up, some of the tutorials may end up being just 3 or 4 people, and that's okay. We have plenty of room. You know, a couple of the offices which were assigned are small conference rooms, so we have a lot of flexibility to really customize your experience. Tom?
Do you want suggestions for additional tutorials that people could give? I mean, what
I think we should put them on the board.
Okay, and so can we add some? So like if
Yeah,
I want to
absolutely.
do a GT tutorial, then I can do
Yes,
that? Okay,
yes,
fine.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I think we should just schedule the tutorials like we would on conference session.
Okay.
But tomorrow we want to focus more on like learning how to do a thing.
Mhm.
And then we also need a lead for those. So I think when you put it on the board, be clear whether or not you're volunteering to lead that tutorial, so Tom would lead a QT tutorial, or you're requesting a tutorial.
Maybe you should make a separate column that's just like
Yeah.
tutorial requests or something. And then,
Yeah. Good, so we can do that now. So to the whiteboard.
which is conveniently right outside the one inch.
Yes, although, yes?
Nothing. No, I was.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand.
I was going like. to
I
the
see.
whiteboard.
All right, good day, everybody. Let's just clap. Clap because it feels right. The right thing to do. Should I turn this off?
Please.
The red light wasn't on.
No, it doesn't seem to be on.
Are we going to be able to use this machine tomorrow?
I'm gonna leave it here, yeah.
Awesome. Because then I think it would be good if in the future we had the